In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, family. Welcome to another powerful edition of America in Black and White, where we don't just talk about the culture, we honor the architects, the healers, the visionaries, and the truth tellers who shape it. Tonight, we sit with a man whose work sits at the intersection of wellness, justice, creativity, and community transformation. Dr. James B. Golden is not simply an industrial psychologist, he is a systems builder, a strategist, a cultural craftsman, a man who has spent decades helping organizations heal, helping leaders grow, and helping communities reclaim their power. From addiction education to executive coaching, from poetry to prison reentry, from anti racist advocacy to wellness innovation. Dr. Golden has committed his life to lifting people up and redesigning the systems that once held them down. This evening, we explore the journey, the mission, and the mindset of a man who believes in the possibility of transformation, not just for individuals, but for entire institutions. So settle in, lean forward, and prepare for a conversation rooted in truth, brilliance, and excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. James B. Golden. Hello, Dr. Golden.
Hello, Charles. How are you? It's wonderful to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you, and I thank you for blessing us with your presence tonight.
Thank you. The honor is mine. I'm really grateful.
So, is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we get into the show?
um, I think the first thing that I would say is trigger warning. I'm not somebody who bites their tongue. And so
Mhm.
I want to say that. But I also want to thank God for allowing me to be here and just for being merciful and allowing me to continue to live in this life when I could have been gone.
So, again, that's powerful speak, but that I know that that's truth telling, and that's why I would like to lead into the show, where I would like to have our audience get the opportunity to know a little bit more about you, Dr. Golden, before you got to be Dr. Golden and all of your foundations. Can you tell us what was the earliest moment you realized you were called to help people heal and grow?
Man, I think what's really interesting, I have these incredible parents, and I think everything always starts with them for some reason. The career that I have, it closely mirrors a lot of the things that they did that I watched them do. And I remember one moment very early, I had to be maybe 8 or 9, and I'm from Salinas, California, which is this little city, but it's extremely famous because there's this one writer who's absolutely brilliant named John Steinbeck, who everybody's read, who wrote and chronicled Salinas. But what they don't know about Salinas is that when I was growing up, Salinas was considered one of the deadliest cities per capita in America. And so I remember about 8 years old, my dad was a member of the Peace Builders, which was this service organization in Salinas that fought for peace. And there was a program citywide, and I was asked by my then, I would call her a mentor for young James, Her name was Josephine Morris, and I speak her name today. But she asked me to speak at this event. I had no idea. I'm just a little kid, but she sat with me and helped me write my speech. And I stood on phone books at First Baptist Church, and I spoke to hundreds of people in a crowd. And I was shaking and trembling, but my parents were there, and I got to look at them while I was giving this speech. And I think that that was my first time really believing that I didn't even know then that I'd be fighting for justice, but it was definitely a foreshadowing to Dr. James B. Golden.
Oh, wow. Did your upbringing shape your understanding of community responsibility and service?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I've been in this black skin for 40 years, and I grew up with parents who were freedom fighters. And I know people say that, but both of my parents were NAACP president in a historically racist city. I mean, this city, though it's beautiful and it's agriculture, this was the same community that ran Langston Hughes literally out by KKK mob in the 1930s. And so I think for us, my mom being a dedicated and lifelong activist in the community, it had to get in my blood. We were doing Kwanzaa all the time. I would go to school talking about Kuji Chagalia, and my classmates didn't know what I was talking about. You know, we were giving these, my brother Samson was giving these large Dr. King speeches. He did the entire I Have a Dream speech by memory, you know, when we
Oh,
were
wow.
children during the MLK Remembrance Day. And so, you know, this is just, it's been life for me. I mean, our childhood dogs were named Malcolm and Martin. So, you know, this is who we are. We've always seen activism, and we've been at the forefront of marches and struggle.
So, in just thinking about, that last statement, like, where did that take you, and what were you actually thinking of as you continuously grew into your career? Like, did that have some shape and form of, and motivated you to continue to be the truth teller that you are?
I think so. I think there was a lot of factors, certainly literacy. And I had to begin reading really early. We had to read books. You know, my parents did not play that. We had the entire encyclopedia in our home growing up. It was right by the front door, and education was extremely important. I got to grow up with a mother who was getting her master's degree while we were children and was taking us to class and different things. So as I read, and I fell in love with Langston Hughes, and I learned about the writing of Nikki Giovanni and Stokely Carmichael and so many other people, it just became an infusion. Like, these people infused themselves into me, and it continued when I went to college and I became the Black Student Union president, and we were out there doing all kinds of stuff that could have got us kicked out of school in the early 2000s. But, you know, I think that it was exciting because my foundations as a child really set in motion who I was going to become. And I think that I always tried to get away from it and prove to myself, well, I'm not like this. And I still kept getting called back in every new job and every new venture, every new career. My first boss, when I was 15 years old, I wanted to go work at the Men's Warehouse. I wanted a regular job at the mall, and I didn't get hired for that. I ended up working for the mayor of the city, who's now this historical assemblywoman, Ana Caballero, in California. And she didn't play that. She made us civic minded. We were 16-year-olds that were sitting in city council meetings, and we were advocating and marching across Salinas. And so, yeah, like, I had to become this person.
Hmm. Wow. Which experience led you towards psychology and specifically industrial psychology?
Okay. You know, I've had this career that has jumped around major disciplines, not just let me move in the justice field, but my first major career job as an adult was working in the justice system with adjudicated Black and brown youth in Los Angeles. And I think that working through that system really pushed me into a space where um, I had to do this as a career. I think it led me to understanding that, well, this is also what you're here to do. So I'd probably say, working there, working with adjudicated youth.
So, who poured into you during your formative years and helped shape your worldview?
Oh my gosh. The first person that just popped in my head was my childhood pastor. His name was Pastor Al Davis.
Okay.
Giant black man with a giant afro. He's still around. He came to my doctoral graduation. He's one of the most emotionally brilliant men that I know. I mean, he really has been a pillar in our city. And I can't think of many men on a shorthand other than my father and my grandfathers that have meant that much in my life for many different reasons. This guy literally held me when I was a baby. So I think Pastor Davis is one of those people. But then I'm an educator, and there
Mhm.
are three teachers that to this day I would do anything for. And the first was my first and one of my only black teachers growing up in Salinas. Her name was Corliss Kelly. She was my sixth grade teacher. She also taught my older brother 5 years before that. And she was the first person that I believe really believed in me and saw me as a young black man. And I really appreciated her. And Elizabeth Berkland was my senior English AP English teacher. And of course, when I became a writer, I attributed so much to her introducing me to Zora Neale Hurston and her introducing me to a deep study on Langston Hughes. And these are the people that raised me. There were people. I was a church musician for my childhood and all that comes with that, playing the piano and the organ. And I remember unsung heroes like Clarissa Carter, who I remember when I was probably 3 or 4, I was getting on the piano and just banging keys. And she was this incredible blues musician, and she just did everything at church. And she came over and she looked at my hands with curiosity, and I felt seen by her. A lot of people in my church growing up were that. And then I had in the black community, we have play aunts and uncles. This was like my auntie for real, and her name is Charlesetta Williams, and she's had me since I was a baby. And I think that she raised me. So like I was raised in this community with a variety of black people who were service workers, who had worked in factories, who were running businesses, who were musicians. And I felt incubated and I felt special. And I'm really grateful that I had that growing up.
Wow, with that kind of foundation, like, did that also add some of that strength and that resilience that you have to want to do better, be better, and to serve?
Yeah, I think there was this unspoken expectation that I used to hate, but I think
Mhm.
that people saw something in me when I was a child. And I would always get people who would just give me a little bit of money here or there. Or if I did something in school, they would give me a pat on the back. They would really encourage me. So I felt like I always owed it to my community and to these people to do well. And it stopped me from. I was still bad. I still did things. I was out there stealing and doing all kinds of stuff. But I think it kept me from going to jail. It kept me from having a drug addiction, different things. I was busy. I was in sports. I had coaches to answer to. I had a boss who was famous and I didn't want to throw salt on her name. And I had a family that I didn't want to embarrass. And I had grandparents who I knew I would have to answer to if I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. So there was always a check and balance for me. And I
Mhm.
did just enough that you're supposed to do at those ages to push and rebel. But I was pretty consistent. I think I was a good kid, and I had a lot of eyes on me at all times.
Wow. So, personal challenges helped refine your purpose.
Say that one more time.
What personal challenges helped refine your purpose?
Oh, personal challenges. You know, I've had a lot of those. For me,
Mhm.
mostly it's been health issues. I've had a lot of health issues in my life. I have some chronic illnesses, and that I developed in adulthood, and it changed the way that I think I see life. Like knowing that you could die early, or that your later years, my hands could begin to cripple up a little bit. It does change how you live in the day. I think, for me, it was mental health struggles. I didn't have the normal mental health struggles that I think people would think of automatically, but my family, we've all had a history of mental health, concerns, and having a mother who is also a licensed therapist, I think helped us to normalize a lot of the conversations around, hey, we're not okay. And so I wasn't ashamed to be depressed. I never felt ashamed. I was depressed, but I wasn't ashamed of it. I felt that my depression growing up really did make me more aware, and it really pushed me into a space of being emotionally intelligent. I had to look everywhere to see who people were. I had to make sure that I was safe at all times. And then I started to realize that I think I'm losing a lot of people very quickly. And there were so many deaths, Charles, like in my life, that it felt like I had lost 3 lifetimes of people very quickly. These were very close, important people to me. These were friends, and I lost all of my aunts and uncles on my dad's side for the most part, and I lost my grandparents weeks apart. And the love of my life was murdered violently, and my all of my mentors, it just felt like they were just dying rapidly, and I couldn't even stop to grieve because it was like as soon as I had read a poem at one funeral, I was going to another one. So I think that grief took over, and I had to really intentionally pause myself and everything I was doing, and I had to shut down for about 5 years, and I had to come to terms with what does it mean, and what is a death, and how are we going to move forward without it controlling us and our ability to function, or having to gain 30 pounds every time somebody dies. Like that's what I had to experience.
Dr. Golden, I got to tell you, I don't think anyone would think of you having those kind of challenges because I think, when you just look at the strength, the resilience, and how you are so multifaceted in all these things that you're doing, you would just never think you have time to even think to have a challenge. But, this is where I think when we look at strong men like yourself, and we have people out in our communities that face these very challenges that you're talking about, and they don't know how to deal with those. And I'm sure you've run across some of those people that you've had to help. What are some of the things that you have told people or try to help people to cope and to get through a lot of those kind of challenges?
It's really a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because when it comes to the Black community, we are so far behind, and not by our own doing. A lot of it is rooted in slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. And so we're just playing catch up on a lot of things. And these systems aren't built for our health, and people aren't genuinely concerned about the survival of Black mental health. And so I realized that I am very privileged within the Black community to have been able, one, to leave my home community. I have friends who have been there their entire times, and I got to leave home. I got to figure things out on my own, and then I had all these years of education, learning, and every time I got a degree, I was learning something about myself. So I was fixing myself. I went through about 12 years of therapy, and nobody knew I was in therapy for the most part. It was very hard. I was crying. I was angry. I would come back home. My roommate would be nervous. I went through periods where I wanted to commit suicide, and I had to be on a safety plan. I had all these different things. And then you get to a place of healing and understanding. And then it's like, okay, now I'm looking at people in my life, my family, my friends, and I'm like, you need some help. And I see myself and my struggles in you. And what's hard for me as an empathetic person is to see people suffering and to not help, which then leads me to a savior complex, which then burns me out, which creates another mental health issue. And
Yeah.
so I think that all of that is lumped in, but that's the issue. When I grew up, we learned about Sankofa. We have to go back and bring information forward to our community. I learned that collectivism is important for Black survival. If I have this skill, I'm going to make sure that my people have it. So I just had to get really smart about how I do it so that I don't burn myself out. Because I can't be on a 4-hour phone call with all of my friends who think that I'm their only friend. And I can't fix the problems in my family, and I can't stay in spaces that are unsafe for me, no matter how bad that it makes people in my family feel. I have to be able to survive and live my life in peace because I have a greater mission than unpacking, some of these difficult things that experiences that we're going through.
So, what did your educational journey across multiple disciplines influence your approach to leadership?
I don't know is the answer. I think that leadership for me started really early, and my mom always tells this story. One year, I probably was 5 years old, and I said to my parents, "I want to get all my friends together at the house," and they're thinking I'm going to have a party. I wanted to have a business meeting where I was the president or the leader of the group. This is a 5-year-old boy who doesn't even know what a business is, but I was already feeling a call to leadership. And so I think I just followed that throughout my life. And, I think that growing up and experiencing and being sensitive and really taking in, I was 10 years, I was probably 8 to 10 years old. No, I was 7 years old. And I got to see Bill Clinton on the campaign trail,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I got to stand, says my mom took a picture with him, but I'm looking at these national leaders and I am listening and I am observing them and I am learning what leadership is and what it isn't.
Hmm.
And I think that that has been a thread in my life. I've paid attention to the people who were making decisions in rooms. Every job I've been in, I have looked at the senior leadership to see what are they doing that's good? What can I pull for when I'm in those seats and spaces? But I'm equally looking for where am I disappointed so that I don't ever do that to anyone.
Mm. So, what does wellness mean to you on a personal level?
Wellness to me is the connection of mind, body, spirit, and soul. And it means that there's a harmony between all of those pieces. And if one piece is not in harmony, you are not well. And so then your number one priority becomes doing everything you can to get back to that outer circle where it's a full circle and it's not like a moon. And this happens throughout our lives. It's illness for me. Sometimes I had a flare up a couple weeks ago and I was like, we're going to do everything we can right now to not go to the emergency room, because if I do that, then I'm going to have to cancel my clients who need me because they're in crisis, and that's going to impact my financial health. And if I'm not eating right, I'm not going to feel good, and you're not going to get the best of my brain in these meetings. And if my soul and my spirit are not right, I'm going to be shut down as a human being. I'm not going to be empathetic. I'm not going to be able to be authentic to who God wants me to be. So it's our number one job. We have to balance ourselves, and you got to take care of your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul.
So, what do you do to help your clients connect those three things in that circle? Because I do understand the stressing of the importance of those, because I think from a functionality of just a functioning human being, especially an adult human being, if we don't have those things, then there's a lot of things I'm sure we're going to be missing. How do you help your clients to connect those things?
Very carefully. You know, when you're working with adults, adults don't like to be told what to do and what not to do. So that's the first thing I don't do. I usually don't tell people what to do. I'm a psychologist, I'm an industrial psychologist. So I do know how to help lead people to the answers that they're looking for. And I'm very good at conversations. I'm very good at seeing a person. And sometimes it scares me because I will talk to somebody for 30 minutes and I will feel like I genuinely know who they are. And I'm picking up on the smallest cues and the smallest twinges in their face. And it tells the story. And it's a trap because I don't like being around people for that reason, because I'm like, dang, I'm gonna have to read you. And I really don't want to, but I'm forced to. I think people come to me for that reason because leaders have already hit a mark where you feel like you've arrived and that everything is fine, and that, you know, if I can't balance my schedule and I feel overwhelmed, then that's just an issue that I have, and that just comes with leadership. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to. There's a reason why you feel overwhelmed, and it's probably not what you think it is, and it's probably something related to your childhood, and it's probably something that you are missing on that total health circle. And so I do ask questions and I help them arrive at, wow, I have really neglected my kids lately. Okay, cool. What does that mean to you? That's my soul. Those are my heartbeats, and nothing's more important to that. Okay, well then let's try this out. Let's try to get back with your kids and come back in a couple of weeks, and let's see what life is like, how you're feeling. And that's really what it is. It's leading leaders to find out who they were. I work with service professionals, people who want to make changes in this world, and they're the people who are the hardest on themselves. They're the
Oh,
people that, you know, will bend over backwards and kill themselves taking care of everyone else. And so I let them see, hey, you're not exercising. So if you end up in a wheelchair because you let your diabetes run up high, like, how is that helpful to the people in the home that you have? We have those kind of conversations. It's very real, it's very black, and it's very honest.
poetry become part of your identity and your healing?
I'll say that first part one more time.
How did poetry become part of your identity and your healing?
So I think what people don't know, and there's all these different phases of James B. Golden. So depending on when you meet me, you will not know a lot about me. You will not understand. There's people who met me when I was a touring poet, and I had a very successful poetry career. I didn't expect it to be successful. The Black community really stepped up and supported me, and I was just this young writer that just got a degree, an English degree in college, and I said, my voice is poetry. Everybody I love is a poet. I started reading Nikki Giovanni. I think that was probably the poet that changed my life. I would say Langston Hughes is my main guy. You know, this is the first poet that I really loved, but Nikki Giovanni felt like home very differently. And I remember our stories are very similar. We both first self-published our first books, and we both pushed them, and we both had a community of Black people that supported them. And, you know, for me, poetry was a release because there were just things that I couldn't say out loud, either to myself or to the world. I would write poems, and I have journals full of them. When I couldn't find the words to express what I was feeling, I knew that I could put these images on a page and somehow it would communicate and it would heal me. I just wasn't aware that that's what I was doing. But when I read Nikki Giovanni, I felt healed and I felt seen and I felt heard. So I knew it was possible. And I think that was my introduction to poetry and becoming part of healing and leadership. It was really thinking about the people that I respect the most in this world have been poets. And I was a musician first. When I went to start a BA program when I was 17 years old, my parents had me in a music camp, a really prestigious one at University of the Pacific, which is one of the best music schools. And that's where I thought I was going to go to school, and they didn't accept me. But that's because I wasn't supposed to be a composer. I think that all of those things still were there. Like the music was rhythm and it was rhyme, and poetry was the words and meter and form. And so I learned very early on how to interact with emotion, how to move someone. I can get on stage still today and read a poem and it will touch people's hearts. And so when I speak as a leader, it's the poet speaking because I'm speaking into someone. I'm lifting them, or I am identifying who they are. I look them in the eyes when I'm on stage, and it's poet James that's actually there. It's not business James. But what I'm talking about is business. And I think that's very unique, and it's cool and it's exciting, but it's scary sometimes. And yeah, poetry, I will never not be a poet. I mean, that is the core of who I am. When we had a childhood, one of my play uncles just recently passed away. And although I haven't published a book in 11 years, his family asked for a poem. People know that that's who I am at my core.
Wow. What role did creativity play in your development as a scholar and strategist?
I love that. You know what? I'm a creative for sure. I think I don't like to be bored. I do not like doing things that have already been done. And when I feel like I know something, I'm ready to move on. I just do not like being in a space where I'm the expert, or look at me, I've become the Michael Jackson of this. I'm just not interested in that. I want to push the boundaries of what it means to be a human being in
Mhm.
every part of my life. I want to learn everything. And the more that I learn, I realize that I really don't know that much. And it scares me a lot of times because I'm like, I think people think that I know more than I actually do. And for me, I think creativity is important because it helps you dream.
Mhm.
I want to take the smallest thing and figure out a way to make it new and vibrant. And I tell my teams, I have multiple teams. I tell them all the time, I what are we scared to do? What has never been done before? What are things that we can do with this project that can have the max impact in this world? Don't just think about Los Angeles, think about creating something that can change the world. Like that is where creativity becomes a leadership. I'm going to Harvard right now, and my program is executive. It's an executive education program. So it's all CEOs, but I'm focusing on strategy. So you take this creative mindset, and I'm going in there with people who run Fortune 500 companies. I'm the little guy. I'm like, I built a nonprofit college in Los Angeles, and they're like, thank you for your service. We have these multi-billion-dollar companies that we run, but we're getting the same education. And I'm taking my creative mind into the classroom, and I'm thinking broadly about the core strategy that I have to learn because I need to know the business acumen. But I'm now thinking about, well, how can I do this differently?
Mhm.
How can I take the core of what I'm learning and do something that will change the world, not
Mhm.
just make me a billionaire?
Wow. Something that I find to be creative is like, those posts that you do on LinkedIn. There are a lot of those, as you say, when you write, I promise you that they hit. And every time I get the opportunity to catch one of those, I'm always reposting it because when I'm reading it, I'm like, my God, like where did that come from? But it's so deep. And so, how do you go this deep in writing? You know, that when you're putting this out there, I mean, because I'm sure that the message has got to be, I know the message is positive, but how do you get that deep into your thoughts to write such short, like nice little posts like you do?
I think a lot. I think that's another thing people don't know. I happen to be someone who's actually extremely quiet. If you meet me in person, I am literally I do not talk a lot, and it's the counter of how most people meet me. Most people meet me on stage or in social media, and so you think here's this huge extrovert that is just always in a conversation. I'm actually very quiet, and I keep quiet so that when it's time for me to be loud, I can do that. And so I think what I'm doing is I'm allowing myself to process, and I'm taking and I'm synthesizing things from my life. I'm not looking for what's something clever to say online today to get some likes. I'm actually thinking about all the disciplines in my life, all the people, my family. I'm thinking about what I've seen, current events, historical events, and I'm processing it. So when I write something, if I have a quote, if I have an article, it's rooted in a thought process. And I'm trying to always connect all of these different pieces, and I'm trying to maximize impact. So when I write an article, and this comes from being a journalist, I was a journalist. That was one of my other careers, writing for Vibe and Clutch and Jazz Times and all these different things. But it's how do you explain Billie Holiday to a 7-year old, but also their grandparent will love your article as well, who actually saw her live. And I have these conversations about writing to say, well, I need to be able to connect her to Erica Badu. I also need the grandparent to understand the historical significance of Billie Holiday to racial justice. But then I also need to talk about the Library of Congress and why she was foundational in all of music. And I need to talk about her abuse. And I need to be able to do all this. And that is how my mind works with any subject or anything. So it's never a one sentence answer. It's always thousands of sentences that have been distilled into one moment, which is why you feel it, and because it's authentic.
Mhm. Wow. When you look back, what moment stands out as the turning point in your life?
Oh my gosh, I've had so many of those. I've had a lot of turning points. A lot of turning points. Um, I think that moving to Los Angeles and leaving my home was a turning point. I
Mm.
was a son of the city. Like as much, I mean, I was voted. I think in high school they voted me. I mean, this was a million years ago, but most school spirit. I loved Salinas, and I still do. I felt very attached. And I had to leave, and I had to learn to be a man, and I had to learn to fight battles on my own. And just be, I couldn't always have something to rely on. I had to become resilient. And so I think that pushed me into finding who I was. I think it pushed me to um, dealing with darkness and finding ways to light, and it set my career in motion. If I wouldn't have moved to Los Angeles from the little town in middle California, I don't think I would have been exposed to art of this level. I don't think I would have been exposed to business at this level and education. So I think that was probably the biggest turning point for me. But I've had a lot of things that have happened along the ways. I've had a lot of experiences that have happened. If we're talking about me as a writer, I will tell you that the first time that I opened my mailbox and I had I have it over here. I had a handwritten note from Nikki Giovanni on
Oh,
letterhead
wow.
that said Nikki Giovanni.
Oh,
And this
man.
happened with every book that I published. Um, I think that was a turning point. That's when I felt scared because I was like, oh, this is real. I wasn't playing. You say I'm a poet. I read, I do all this. Yes, I published a book. But when you have the Nikki Giovanni write you a handwritten note that says, keep on keeping on, and you
Wow.
frame that note and it sits on your desk for the next 20 years, that's a turning point. Yeah, it was serious.
Oh my God, yeah. Let's transition over to your work in entrepreneurship and Golden Global Enterprises. What inspired you to create Golden Global Enterprises?
When I was in my doctoral program almost 10 years ago, I struggled because I said, okay, I'm in this industrial psychology program. I need y'all to help me understand how I got here because I was an activist, I was a writer, I went and taught K through 12 English. I was fighting the good fight in social justice and in juvenile halls. And I worked at Starbucks. I did all I don't understand how I got here. I think that Golden Global, I feel that it is the summation of not my life, but my life's work up until this point. Everything that I have done throughout my career now is synthesized in one place. Every career, every job that I've had has been about people being healed and has been about leading. And I think that that has been the core function in any role, whether it was working with children with autism, I worked at a celebrity rehab, teaching kids in the hood how to read, and the most brilliant writers I've ever seen. But it was really about leadership. And so I got this incredible business acumen from my doctoral program and just from leadership in these spaces. I had to learn how to lead and deal with hard things. And to the point where people just kept calling me for advice. And my coworkers that were on the same line as me when I was building the college, they all wanted to be coached. They all would come to me. I don't know what to do. My team is falling apart. We need a strategy for this. And I just thought, I'll be a good coworker. I'll help out. I needed to be able to focus on that. I think that that was a calling for this time for me. And so Golden Global is a synthesis of all of those things. It is the ability to coach, but it's also the ability to love on leaders who are usually invisible. I work with leaders that are similar to Mother Teresa and Nelson Mandela and Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and who run Jewish synagogues and service companies and nonprofits and justice that are trying to end homelessness. I'm working with leaders who have these incredible, successful companies, but they're dying inside. And so
Mhm.
every single client looks different. Sometimes it's we have expanded too far and we need help understanding how to go. We need strategy. Okay, I'll come and I'll bring my strategist lens. Or it's I just lost a pivotal team member and my whole organization is crumbling. We're in crisis. All right, I'll come in and help you guys stabilize. It could be leaders who are ready to pivot and go out on their own and do work. And they say, I've already run multiple successful for-profit companies. Now I want to do a nonprofit, but I haven't been in this space and I need your help. Okay, I got you. Let's start planning. Let's start capacity building. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm always going to speak. I give lectures all the time. Sometimes they're in writing, sometimes it's in education after building a college, or sometimes it's talking about race relations in healthcare. Those are things that I'm always doing. But Golden Global, I think, exists to help the leaders who are trying to change the world and help the world evolve. So I'm grateful for it.
Does Golden Global work with the advocate that you are? Because when you do a lot of advocacy, for the community and for people or different cultures or whatever have you, how does the advocacy part fits into Golden Global?
James B. Golden, for one. So, if you're going to work with me, you have to understand what that means. And I'm very clear with everybody. I'm like, did you look me up? Because if you want me to come speak, you need to be intentional about that. I will never go somewhere and not tell the truth. Last year, I went on a speaking tour and I was invited to speak at a conference right after the current president had just gotten into office in January. And that was when all of the DEI language had been pulled from federal organizations. So we were told that we could not speak at this conference about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what did I do? I said, I told you guys who I am, and I'm not going to be silenced. I was standing steps from the White House, like literally a block away. And I gave this talk and I said, we are not going to be silent. We have not been here since the 1500s so that we can now be told that we need to be silent. So that's the person that you're getting in any kind of work that you want me to do, whether it's coming in to work with your team or do a training, understand the weight of that. I'm not going to perform. I am not going to cower. I am not going to be politically correct. I'm going to be honest. You are dealing with a Black man who has been in this body for 40 years and who grew up with grandparents who were raised in the South. I am not that person, and I never will be. And so that's what you have. I tell them, this is what you're getting. This is why people want to work with me, though, is because they see that there's a fearlessness there. And I have no problems. In my other office, I have a giant photo of Malcolm X intentionally behind my camera. So no matter who I'm meeting with, you understand who you're talking to.
Wow. What gap did you see in the wellness and organizational development space that you felt compelled to fill?
Emotional intelligence. And that's the trade-off. In business school, you have people who are scientists. Most of the people that I've been alongside in business and management leadership studies, they are brilliant scientists. They do not a lot of times have the emotional intelligence that I got from how I was raised or from poetry or from psychology. And so I think that is what goes in. When I work with people, I can build a strategy, I can build a business plan, but I can also pour into you. And I can also say and see things that other people in my shoes as management consultants will not see. And, that is, I think, the gap that is being filled. Where we have to go in business is to understand that this factory mentality and this seeing human beings as numbers and capital is not going to work in the future. And it doesn't work today. We can see that with Gen Z, who's like, you want us to do what at work? You thought you could say what to us in what tone? We're not the generation for that, because we will quit on the spot. It's different time. And I'm helping people see every day, if you're going to be a leader, you really have to be a leader. You have to serve your people. You cannot just put these titles on and expect that because you're paying somebody that they're just going to deliver. These people are giving you more time than a lot of times they're giving their families. So you need to see them as full human beings and you need to treat them that way. That's what they're getting from me.
The business leaders that are watching this show tonight and those that may want to have you consult with them, What are they getting when they ask Golden Global Enterprises to come and work with them? What are they going to get from Golden Global?
You're getting from Golden Global a company that sees you not for the capital that you raise, but we see your intentions. Leaders forget why they started their companies in the first place. And I remind them of that. And we get back to that very quickly. You're getting somebody who is extremely competent in business, but someone who also knows how to motivate and how to pull things out of you that you forgot or you may not have even known are there, to use my creativity to push your company further than you could ever imagine it could go. You know, that is what people are getting. They're getting the James B. Golden experience. Really, it's all of the things that I've talked about. It's my childhood, it's activism, it's service, it's a support of people, it's mental health. You know, it's make sure that you balance your own personal wellness. It's do something with your organization that changes the world and helps us evolve. It's all of those things in one, and will help you get, you know, a little bit more money and cut where you need to.
So, how do you define wellness strategy in a corporate or institutional context?
Wellness strategy really is, it's a methodology, and so I approach my work with businesses, whether it's strategy or development, as a form of healing. And so that's how we get wellness strategy. You know, we are healing systems. This is how me as an industrial psychologist I approach work. I am not a fixer, I'm a healer. These are the connections that I have to my grandparents. My grandmother was a healer. She healed through cooking and baking, and she, you know, worked in a hospital and took care of people, cleaned them up. Those are the roots that I have. And so I think when we talk about healing systems, I look at the company as a whole, or if you ask me to come in and do people work, I'm looking at your teams and I'm diagnosing illness in those systems. And then we are going to treat it as a medical condition, and we're going to find ways to make it better, to make it match the vision, the values, and the mission statement that you put up on your website. It's going to be working with boards to help them understand that the CEO that you hire has to match your delivery model. It has to match the consumer, the people in the community that are going to be impacted by your work. That's what we're doing. We're healing systems.
So, what are the biggest misconception organizations have about wellness?
That's a good question. I think one of the big misconceptions that I see with organizational leaders is that wellness is a means to an end. I think people see wellness as transactional. So let me throw some carrots to my staff. Let me offer a discount on a gym membership. Wellness is the work that we do. Leadership is wellness. And I think that that's where I try to push my leaders to go is wellness is an all-encompassing piece. It's the same thing that I was talking about with our individual wellness. You can say the same thing about a business. Yeah, you can bring in millions of dollars a year. It doesn't mean that your business is well. You know, and so we have to change the lens by which we look at our businesses and the work that we do to understand that we're actually trying to heal. And it keeps us humble. It reminds us that, you know, we're not always all that we think we are, or there's always opportunities to be better, to do more, to serve more. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, yes. Um, How do you help leaders shift from reactive to proactive wellness cultures?
And that's a big one. And that's a huge one that we do all the time. I have grace for leaders. I built a college from the ground up, literally, from conception to awards. And so I understand I'm not just somebody who went and got an MBA and who coaches people. When leaders talk about the issues that they go through, I most likely have experienced that in some form. And so I think that there's so much, I have a lot of respect for leaders. I want them to be able to understand that preparation is
Mhm,
better than sacrifice at the end.
mhm.
That almost sounded like a Baptist sermon a little bit. Like
Mhm.
we need to invest our time up front in healthy strategy, and reactivity pulls resources from your company. So we have to prepare. We have to set systems in motion that will allow health in our company so that we don't have to call the doctor every 5 minutes, no pun intended, to come in and diagnose and help. Let's just start this stuff from the beginning. I have my pen out in every meeting. I'm like, okay, well, let's build a strategy for this.
Mhm.
Let's predict what the fallout of this decision could be. And let's really think this through. I love it. I could do this. It's like brushing my teeth. I love this stuff.
So, what does sustainable organizational change look like to you?
Sustainability is a mark for evolution. We have to understand that when we participate in capitalism and we are now moving towards that 1% that's in control, that we have a responsibility to the planet and to the human race. You cannot just take money from people and think that you don't have a responsibility on this planet. And so, as a truth teller, I want all companies to be sustainable. I want all companies to think about, how can I lower my carbon footprint? What about my usage of plastic in the company? Am I overutilizing AI at a time where it might not be able to handle it? We're having these conversations right now because ultimately these companies are participating and they're taking from people who don't have the same power that they do.
Mhm,
So our leaders have to take responsibility for the planet. When you have been blessed with money, the people that are on Skid Row that don't have homes to live in and don't have jobs are your responsibility.
Yep.
We are not individualistic people. That is some Western idealized stuff that it's just not who we are. It's not. Black people are not like that. We were not raised like that. That is not where we come from. We came from
Exactly.
communities where one person will cook for the entire community.
Yep.
We did not come from a place where I'm going to step on everybody together. So we have to be sustainable in these roles. We have to make sure that we are using our leadership to provide for the community, that we're actually giving back, that there's portions of the work that we do that are going to help underserved people. You don't have to be Malcolm X. You don't have to be Angela Davis, and you don't have to stand up there like Huey Newton with a gun. But what you do have to do is understand that people need you right now. And you have been blessed and you have been placed into a place of privilege to be able to give back and to help this world. That's just me. I'm standing on it, and that's where we're at. And I'll challenge any leader on that.
That very same question, I want to flip that and I want to ask you this because I love what you just stated. But let's take that same question and let's flip that as to what does that look like culturally?
What does that look like culturally? One, what I can tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like people who will sell their people out for a check. It doesn't look like going to perform at a MAGA event because you need to raise capital. It looks like, I think it's, we can see it. We can look around our communities. We can see that there are Black people who make a lot of money, but who still will put on shorts and a t-shirt and they'll go down and feed the homeless on Skid Row. We see it in mentorship programs for young Black youth that are free. We see it in paying for college tuition. We see it in offering jobs to people who are just getting out of jail and prison who find it hard to get a job somewhere. Like we see it in the little things. And sometimes what I like to do with people is say, you don't need to do what everybody else is doing, but do something that is in your purview. I know that I'm a writer. And so if I can contribute by writing plans or by writing advocacy letters or publishing articles that support my community, I'm going to do that. If it is, I have Oprah's money where I can open a school for girls, I'm going to do that. If I have been blessed with resources and housing, I'm going to make sure that some of those apartment units go to people who are unhoused, and it's not going to be hard for them to get it, or I'm not going to have to depend on Section 8 for them to get into those apartments. We have to change the concept of how we think as human beings, and we have to see each other as each other. There's no difference between you and I. We are the same, regardless of our skin color or where we grew up or how much money we have. I am you. And when I walk outside my door in downtown LA and I see people who are unhoused on the street, I recognize that's my grandmother. That's my nephew. These are people who we're connected to the same source. So it is my responsibility to do something to lift you today, even if that's just giving you the couple dollars that I have in my pocket, or buying you something to eat, or helping you get a job, or just smiling, saying something good to you. We need to bring goodness, make goodness great again in human beings.
Transition over to your authorship and creative work. How did you discover your voice as a writer?
Oh man, I don't know that I don't remember having a voice until I got into school and I had to analyze and understand that I did have a voice. I think my education really helped me. I went to Cal State Northridge, which is a famous school. We are one of the founders of Black Studies in the entire country. And I think, I was in, and I'm still very close. There was one other Black student in our entire program in a school of 34,000 people at that time that was also on a poetry track. So we were English. I was a double major. I was African American Studies and English, but we were on this poetry track, and so we would sit in these classes. It's two Black men, the president of the BSU, another one with a giant afro, and we would have to listen to people say the N word, and look at us when we're reading Huckleberry Finn for the 13th time, and they don't want us to read Toni Morrison. I found my voice that way because I remember the school publication just didn't want to publish my poems, and nobody ever said they were too Black. You're talking about slavery, you're talking about lynching. They didn't want to say that. They wanted, cute poems about whimsical things and frogs and sunsets and stuff that I didn't have the luxury to focus on because I was worried about this young boy being murdered by the police. And so I just found that my voice was hardcore. I'm an angry poet. I am realistic. I will cut fat from a poem like I'm making some ribs. I don't believe in performing. I want to get straight to the meat. And so that's my voice. I wrote a poem called The Lynching of Emmett Till. And when I tell you, I went on tour around the country and read this poem, and I could see people audibly gasping like they had never heard the story before. And I'm like, this is America. This is the same place where the song Strange Fruit was put into the Library of Congress, where people are still fighting for the Congress to recognize lynching, and where we're still being lynched every day in multiple ways.
So, what themes do you find yourself returning to in your poetry?
Blackness. I'm Black. Like, I'm a really, really, I don't think people understand sometimes because they see me in these spaces. They see me wear a Harvard. I am there. I'm like, I put up a post on Instagram and I was like, I am Kool-Aid Black. Like, I am like TCB. I am Blue Magic Black. You know, like my parents, my mom had a Jerry curl. Like, I am like, I'm Aretha Franklin, Otis Redding Black. Okay, I am, you know, so when you read my poems, you're being invited into the Black experience. I can't speak for all Black people, and I have a very specific experience, but you're getting a very, very Black American experience in anything that I write. And sometimes it scares me because a lot of times I'll read in front of white people, and a lot of times I get invited to writers' workshops and different things, and, you know, it's like, here comes the Black poet. And I'm like, I had to let people know, listen, I'm going to use the N-word. I'm going to talk about lynching. I'm going to talk about slavery. I am going to use harsh words towards white people because we're writing poems about the 1950s and they love it. You know, I think that people see an authenticity there. And I took that from Nikki Giovanni. That's what you're getting from me. You're getting themes of sexuality. I really push the edge and the limits when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community. I want to make Black people uncomfortable. I'm like, we need to stop this homophobia. If you are homophobic in 2026, the issue is you, period. We have been around too long. You have seen and interacted with too many gay people for you to still be acting like this. The issue is you, and you need to change. I'm just not going to be around people who are homophobic, period. I don't care how you feel or what you feel I should do or what I should not do. We're not accepting that moving forward. You're the problem. And that's just it. You know, it starts with you. So I push those bounds all the time. And I want people to feel uncomfortable. And I want them to be like, you just talked about, you know, the Black church and all the gays who wrote songs and did it. Yeah, I did. I want you guys to stop silencing these Black boys and girls so they can stop committing suicide because of the things that they're hearing at home because you're scared or you're struggling with your own sexuality issues. So I write a lot about that. I also just talk about being man. I talk about Los Angeles and California. I love California. I was the Salinas Poet Laureate, and I've been writing a book for 10 years on California, which is done. I just need to get it over. And so, you know, like I'm a big fan of California. I'm a big fan of music. I talk about musicians who inspire me. Those are usually my muses: Whitney Houston, Prince, Stevie Wonder. These are people who have been just as important to my life and my work as Nikki Giovanni or Gandhi.
Teaching 4 books of poetry shape your identity as an artist.
It is me. So, you know, what's interesting, if you ever want to know who I am, read the books. It's all there. I didn't know that's what I was doing because I probably wouldn't have put them out. But if you really want to know who James B. Golden is, all you need to do is read the books. It's all there in black and white on the page. And that scared me. The book that ended up winning the Image Award was Afro Clouds and Nappy Rain. And that was of all 4 books, I remember writing it in its totality. It didn't take me a long time. And I took the manuscript and I put it under my bed. I've never done anything like that before. Like just put something under my bed, under the mattress.
Oh, wow.
I put it under the mattress for 2 years. And the only person who knew that I had written it is my roommate, Gwen. And I remember her telling me, she was like, "Are you going to publish that book?" And I was like, I got to a place one day where I was like, I'm just going to send it out. And I looked up a year later, in the Black community around the country. I'm sitting on, I'm sitting at home watching the Image Awards. You know, they used to announce it, who would the nominees were going to be. So I'm just watching it so I can see, well, what did Beyonce get? What, you know, are they honoring Whitney and the different things? And it's Natalie Cole and Vanessa Williams, and they're reading off the names of who's winning. And so I was like, let me just stick around for the Literature Awards just to see. And they said James B. Golden, Afro Clouds, and Appy Rain, right after Hakeem Madabuti, who was one of my heroes as a poet. And I just didn't believe it. I called my mom, and it was just a whole scene. And that whole time during awards season, I felt so out of place. And I got so much response from the writing community, from the Black arts community. I was in spaces. This is when Kiki Palmer first came out, and Alfre Woodard, and I'm sitting at a table with Loretta Devine and Louis Gossett Jr. having lunch, and we're talking about our projects. I got that experience as an artist, and it fed me, and it made me feel like I could. I was just happy to be nominated.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So what does writing give you that other forms of work do not?
Peace. I think it does give me a level of peace. Writing is sacred.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there's a reason why we love the Bible.
Okay.
It's also incredibly written. You know, like if you just need to read some verse, the Bible is an incredible gift, I think, to us. Writing is freedom. I find safety in writing. I find a different part of my identity in writing. I feel like I can flex my academic muscles a little bit better in writing, because sometimes in person, like my thoughts come after because I process a lot. So it's hard for me. You know, like my brother Mark Lamont Hill, who I'm so proud of, and you know, we kind of grew up low key together as scholars in this industry. We used to go to hip hop conferences together and different things. Um, he's really quick. You know, like he can get on CNN and he has all his thoughts in 30 seconds. Me, I'm the person who will be interviewed, but 3 days later, everything connects and I'm like, I should have said that. Like, this is what I was actually trying to say. So writing gives me the ability to wait, to put things down, to edit, to go back and, oh, but I also need to mention this. But this is actually what I was trying to say, and I didn't know it. You know, like that's the kind of scholar that I am. So I appreciate that about writing, all those things about writing.
So how did your work with The Root, Vibe, and Clutch Magazine expand your platform?
Oh man, I'm grateful for the time that, you know, I was a freelance writer. I wrote for a whole bunch of publications, and I was known for having hard hitting, edgy articles at a time where you weren't really seeing them. You know, like it's the same as James B. Golden on a. I was very provocative. I was also a Black male feminist at a time way before Me Too, and before women, in particular Black women, were being honored in these spaces where they were still fighting, where there was still rampant misogynoir in these spaces. And so I was trained. My mentor is Dr. Karen Stanford, brilliant political scientist and feminist, and Mark Anthony Neal. And I was raised on When Chicken Heads Come to Roost. You know, I think for me, it pushed my ability to show people my agency as a Black male feminist. I think that it got to show people that I don't just love music, like I really love it. Like, and I'm willing to recontextualize these artists in a way that's historical. So I wrote what I probably think is the first major think piece on Mary J. Blige that wasn't written about her as, you know, great songs, great gowns, like this was like, let me explain Mary J. Blige's contribution to the psyche of Black people. And, those were the articles I wrote. I wrote the 15th anniversary of the miseducation of Lauryn Hill, one of my favorite articles. That I wrote that for The Root. And I was one of the first people to contextualize that album from within the millennial generation. I'm like, this is our album. I'm a millennial. I was 13 years old when that album came out. No, I wasn't. Yeah, I was like 13, 14, 13, 14. And so I got to talk about this landmark album that's still being talked about, almost 30 years later. So it got to flex this other part of me. And I got to go to all these different shows and meet Kelly Price and all these different people and do all these interviews. And that it was fun, but it was also an honor to be able to take people that we just kind of listen to on the radio and say, no, you are now our version of Ray Charles. Like, you are now our Sarah Vaughan. You have done something that's similar and to what Little Richard or James Brown did back in the 50s. And so that it was an honor for me to be able to do that. Now they're still scared of my articles, but it's because I'm like, well, I've been doing this for too long, so I'm really gonna push the envelope. So, when I send stuff in, they're like, oh, we can't publish this.
They don't have to get over that. Let's transition over to your community organizing and your prison reentry work. This is part of your bio that I found to be really, really interesting, and it also, as I looked at your whole bio from a contextual perspective, it's like I saw a lot of empathy in that. And when I see this, and compared to the people that I've had some folk that were actually in prison that actually do the same work, and it just, I don't know, it speaks volumes to when this in particular, when you do this kind of work, how people are just thrown back out to the wolves. A lot of them don't have no skills, no nothing, but it's organizations like yours and people that actually get into this work. It's really, really important. What first drew you to prison reentry work?
So what's funny about this is that I don't think this was something that I voluntarily went into. It's just, I just end up in these things. I grew up with a father who is still a legend in Monterey County for many reasons. But I think one of the reasons why he's respected is because he was the primary thought leader and operational leader of Wellington Smith Juvenile Hall. And so growing up, my dad was the big boss at Juvenile Hall in my city. And my mom, one of her first jobs in her career was as a probation officer. Mm-hmm. So as much as I tried to stay away from the justice system, I'm going to go be an artist. I'm going to go, work at Universal Studios. I'm going into Hollywood, these different things. I keep going back to jail. I keep going back to my first big career was working with 12 to 18-year-olds who were in the justice system. And the majority of them were Black and brown. I would go into juvenile hall and interview them and see if they were right for a mental health and substance use and sex offender placement. And it was an honor to be able to do that. I think what my experience there in 10 years at a place called Rancho San Antonio, where I got my professional footing in Los Angeles, my experience there allowed me to see the need for advocacy in the justice system. I was going to court. I was seeing how some of these judges were acting. I was seeing how probation officers and parole officers were acting, how these young Black kids were being treated as if they were just the worst criminals. I'm like, he's acting like that because his mother died. He's acting like this because he doesn't know how to read, because nobody has, like, invested that time into him. So of course he doesn't want to go to school, and it's going to get worse and worse every year. He's on drugs because of his sexuality, and he doesn't have anybody to support that. I was seeing them as Afro Clouds and Nappy Rain is about that journey. All those poems, those Curtis Brown poems, are about those boys, and it's their stories. And so I think I saw a different side of justice system. I was tired of seeing my boys being murdered. Every time I was turning around when we were losing a kid, these are kids who would spend years with us. We became their surrogate parents. We took them to their first prom. We graduated them and helped them get their first jobs and helped them get into college, and held them when they lost family members, took them to court and advocated on their behalf, helped them get off drugs. And so I thought, as I started to watch these boys grow into men, now they're like in their 30s, their late 30s now, and I had them when they were like 12 years old. And when I see them now, I'm like, that's all it took. It literally was not me. It was the environment that we created that allowed you to make it. And so I said, well, imagine if everybody in the justice system had that opportunity.
Exactly.
And so that it just becomes a part of all my work. When I built TTC College, that was a major focus for me. It was, we're going to make sure that we are not a pretentious school. You're going to have a chief academic officer who wears Jordans and Chucks, and who will put on a blazer but will wear a t-shirt under it with some jeans. We are going to go to Skid Row and to the homeless encampments, and we're going to go to jail. We're going to teach classes in jail. So our college is taught many classes and many programs in California. Just, they have a hard time with me because I push the envelope and I hold CDCR to the table. I tell them, like, we are here to support these inmates. We are here to support these prisoners. And I think it all goes back to how I saw my dad work when I was little. That's what he did. That was his spirit. And when I'm at home, we can go anywhere. And these are people who are in their 60s now who are calling his name, Bull.
Oh.
And he's like, yeah, I used to work with him when he was in the halls when such and such age. Like, that's all it takes.
Right.
We can all do it.
So what misconception do people have about returning citizens?
I mean, a whole bunch of misconceptions. I think that they're dangerous. I think that people would believe that they're not as skilled. My experience has been people that I have personally hired that have lived experience with the justice system are often more skilled than people who have gone to college for 8 years. I have found that a lot of times they're more trustworthy than people who have worked in the industry for 20 years. I often find that they have more heart than people who have written about healthcare and done projects about them. And I find that they are aligned with our mission the best. Like, the work that I've seen people coming out of jail and prison do has been about reciprocation. It's been about rehabilitation. It's been about giving back to a community that they felt like they might have taken from. And to say, hey, I made some mistakes, but I'm going to make sure that these 10 kids get exactly what they need to hear so they don't end up repeating the same cycles that I did in a system that will harm you. And so that's been my experience. My greatest employees have been justice involved, and they've been ones that to this day I still rock with.
So, what systemic barriers do you see most often in reentry?
The biggest, so I'm an educator, and I think that education is the biggest barrier. I think it's the single biggest barrier. There's many reasons why. Literacy, for one, but also the ability for people to go to school is really hard when you get out and you are in a space of needing to catch up with life. People are coming out and they've been down for 20 years, and it's like I need to also reintegrate back into society. Well, this is a different day and age. And so if you don't know how to use artificial intelligence, or if you are not computer savvy, it can be really hard to integrate back into society. And so um, we know that entry into education right now, a lot of it is computer based, and it's all applications are online. So if I don't even know how to use email, it's going to be really hard for me to get into school. And we also understand that it's really hard to get a job if you don't have an education today. And so I think that, that's a huge, education is a big barrier. Um, I think that recidivism is really difficult um, on people coming out. Uh, the issues with substance use are so hard, not just for people coming out of jail and prison, but just for all of us. It's hard because these are not your grandmother's drugs. When we talk about what do they used to call them, a doobie? When we talk about a blunt today,
Mhm.
we are not talking about a blunt in 1993. A blunt will kill you today because it
Oh,
might be laced with fentanyl.
yes, exactly.
And if you aren't aware of that, then your chances of survival go down. And so I think that there's a lot of gaps in substance use treatment and mental health treatment. But the way that we treat people coming out of jail and prison is a reflection of how we see ourselves. Again, these are us. Any of us could have been in jail for 20 years. Any
Right.
of us. And we would hope that someone would think highly enough of us to give the same kind of grace that we would expect in return.
We spoke about we do Black History 365, and I asked you who were the most influential people in your life and career in Black history. You mentioned to me Nikki Giovanni was the most inspirational and influential person in your life, and Barack and Michelle Obama were the most influential in your career.
Mhm.
Can you tell us why is Nikki Giovanni the most influential person in your personal life?
Because she didn't just teach me how to write a poem. I think Langston Hughes taught me how to write a poem. I studied Mother to Son. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. That taught me how to write. Nikki healed me. Reading a poem like Cotton Candy on a Rainy Day was healing for my spirit and my personal growth. And I think that that's why I hold her in such a high regard. I mean, there are a million incredible Black poets. I mean, Rita Dove is up there for me. Natasha Trethewey. Today, Jericho Brown, who I consider my brother in the industry, Avon Jordan. Um, we have just had a long history. Melvin Tolson. I mean, we could just go down the list. There's so many. But Nikki healed me. And that's why I hold her in such. And I let her know that. I've written her as well. And I let her know what her poems meant.
What lessons from her work continue to guide you today?
Be fearless. If you ever want to know what fearlessness is, read Black Thought by Nikki Giovanni, or read Nikki Rosa. Like take one of her poems and you will understand. I think that Nikki was completely unapologetic at a time where it was very dangerous for Black women. And that taught me something about the potential of a human being, that we have the potential to tell the truth. They might kill us for it, but they'll never kill our souls and our ideas. That's the thing. They tried to kill us, and we still have Malcolm X posters on our wall. So he never dies. And that's what people don't understand. That's what Nikki Giovanni teaches me.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's where the urgency to write came from. And to tell the truth, it's like, y'all can take me out. Somebody will have my book sitting on their coffee table and their child will read it and try to figure out who this ridiculous Black man is.
What Michelle Obama represent to you professionally?
Class. I think, I'm not, I don't get into politics because our lives are political. I find learning in everyone. I'm so grateful that I lived in a generation where, as a young adult, I had the ability to see the first Black man and the first Black woman occupy those seats as president, vice president, and first lady.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it taught me that it is possible. I hate what they had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of class that Michelle Obama had while people were making memes of her as a monkey,
Mm-hmm.
or, Barack Obama went through something similar that Dr. King did, where you can't really please everyone, including your own community sometime. And so what I looked at was not what the outcomes were. It was, how did you handle yourself in the midst of all these things? Not did you always make the right decision, but how did you handle yourself in the midst of all of these things? And that is what taught me how to be this person as a leader. They were very influential in me being able to see myself as somebody who could traverse somebody. Now, if somebody does a monkey meme of me, I'm not Michelle Obama. So I don't think I've gotten there yet. I still go low, and I will, but I try not to. And that's what I'm trying to, that's why they're my inspiration, because I'm trying to get there one day.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I can't they don't want me in the White House.
Oh, you got that right. 500%. Last question for you. How have they influenced your leadership philosophy?
I think Barack Obama in particular has a deep respect for the leaders that came before him. And I think if I were to pull anything from that, I think about the great Reverend Jesse Jackson and how important his presidential campaign was to President Obama's being realized. I think that was important. I also think that what makes Barack Obama unique from all the other white male presidents, which is literally all of them except for him,
Mm-hmm.
is that he was a president for all people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was clear. He changed his philosophy in the middle of his presidency to support the LGBTQ community.
Yes, he did.
Somebody who has the ability to evolve their thought, who is not, I love that he wasn't perfect. That's why I love King. I don't like perfect people. I want my leaders to be a little edgy. I want them to make some mistakes. It lets me know, okay, I can do that too. Okay. We can all be humans. But that's what I learned from him. And I learned more from Michelle Obama, honestly. I think her amount of the grace that she gave, knowing that she's one of the most brilliant people who's ever been in Washington. I mean, you're talking about somebody who is smarter than her husband, who's more studied and learned than her husband, who could have probably done a better job as president. Um, to see the humility that she had, that taught me more about how I want to be on this planet. And to still be black. I just loved that they were still black. They were still eating hot links and playing basketball and, having gospel singers at the White House. They were just still black. I wrote a poem about it where I'm talking about they were frying chicken and eating greens in the White House. That's who I look up to.
So, in closing, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement that you like to leave for our audience? Tell them how to connect with you via your social media, your websites, and all those other good things that you'd like for them to know.
Let me knock that out. So, jamesbgolden.com is the easiest one, but Golden Globals is goldenglobalenterprises.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, James B. Golden, and Instagram, the JB Golden. And Google is also your friend. You can put in James B. Golden and you'll find me. I'm a million places. I want to leave with people that at the end of our lives, when we have to remember who we were, and we have to think through what we've done in our lifetime, I hope that we will be able to sit there with no regrets. I hope that we will be able to think of the impacts that we've made on the human race, on our people, and that we're proud of it. And I want you guys to know that no matter what industry you're in, whether you're an artist, a blogger, or you run a Fortune 500 company, that you matter. You're one of us. We are all the same. We come from the same consciousness and the same God and the same source. And I'm just grateful to be alive at this moment in history, in this iteration, in this skin. Black people are the most beautiful and resilient people. We have been through so much and we have carried so much grace. And I want us to remember the words of Nina Simone, who said, "In this whole wide world, there are millions of boys and girls who are young, gifted, and Black." And that's a fact. That's all I have to say for the rest of my life. So thank you for having me. This was really great to just kind of go back through. And I never think about this stuff because I'm always moving forward. But I'm very grateful for this life and that my community has trusted me for so long.
Well, I want to say to you before closing that I more than appreciate you for coming here. This was a beautiful, beautiful interview. And I just really appreciate the authenticity, that you provided to the audience and people getting to know that you didn't just rise to be Dr. James B. Golden just out the air. You worked and you made that happen. That's the inspiration I want them to get. That's the motivation that I want those people for the audience that we target to receive that message. Because it's just that important that when they can see someone like you that sits here that can give them this interview, but also I call it a masterclass. I want to thank you so very much for that.
Blessings.
And so, in closing, family, tonight we were reminded that transformation is not accidental, it is intentional, disciplined, and deeply human. Dr. James B. Golden embodies what it means to build systems that heal, to write words that literate, and to lead with heart committed to justice and wellness. His journey shows us that when brilliance meets purpose, entire communities rise. As we close, let us carry forward the golden mindset that leadership is service, wellness is liberation, and every one of us has the power to create change that outlives us. Thank you for joining us tonight for another meaningful conversation on America in Black and White. Until next time, stay grounded, stay inspired, and stay committed to the work. Thank you, Dr. Golden. Thank you, everybody that was out there watching. We will see you guys tomorrow night for another great show. Have a good evening.